Okay, we're rolling. Welcome to week 2 of History of Furniture and Interiors. I have added some things. I wrote up some notes covering the material from last week, and I posted them in Blackboard, and I will show you these things up here. Share my screen. Okay, and here. So in Blackboard, over here in this announcements menu, lecture notes. So this, if you look at the this announcement, there's a course link down here, and click that link, and it'll take you to this section that has the. This is inside the Egypt folder. Down here, lecture notes for week 1. Open them up, and you see here. So yeah, this is, I have written notes, and normally what I do when I'm teaching this class is I write notes on the board, and you all write them down in your notebooks. Writing things down does help you to reinforce the information. In lieu of that, here's the, here's just some stuff about generally what I talked about last week. This bar scale, I guess, sort of like a scale of very general of just like history when things were happening. The ancient Egyptian civilizations around 3100, 3150 BCE. The terms, we used to use BC and AD, BC meaning before Christ, AD, Anno Domini, Latin, for in the year of our Lord. More common now, I use BCE before the Common Era, CE Common Era. So this way it's not assuming everyone's a Christian. So here the Egyptians, their civilization lasted for a long time. They were around that region. There's evidence of the Egyptians being there from about 8,000 BCE. These dynastic civilizations that produced the architecture and artifacts that we look at, those started around 3150. So they were there for 5,000 years, and then about almost 3,000 years of a pretty dominant civilization. So that's a long time. The United States has been around for a little less than 250 years. So we got a little ways to go to catch up with the Egyptians. Now, some Stone Age. So this Stone Age basics. I found this nice image of what the village of Skara might have looked like when people were living there. This settlement is contemporary with the Egyptians. So the Egyptians really, they were building this sophisticated civilization really in the late Stone Age. So that to me that says something about their advancement. Something I wanted to make sure that I mentioned: four characteristics of furniture I want you to be aware of: function, social status, technology, and materials. Anytime there is furniture, these are present. Function, of course, what's it used for? How does it work? Its design will be affected by its function, and its function will be affected by its design. I briefly showed you this that first presentation that I wasn't happy with, the intro one. The Voyeuse, this chair that has a really thin, slender back. It's called a waisted back because it looks like it's kind of like a waist. It's really meant, it's a chair that's meant to be used backward. It's kind of a really strong example of a chair's function being a part of its design. Social status might be a little less rigid in the present day, but you definitely can tell the difference between a really nice piece of furniture and a cheap one. Materials, the materials will matter, sort of like are kind of all wrapped up in that. But in the history that we're going to be looking at, a throne is a very clear example of furniture being used to reinforce social status. Technology, furnishings reveal the technology of the day. The Egyptians, for example, their understanding of joinery, how to put pieces of wood together to create, to build strong furniture, is very sophisticated. The dovetail joint. There's down the list. Down this page. There's some more information about the different types of joinery that they are known to have used. Their skill was at a level that it took until about the 18th century for the Europeans to achieve the technological sophistication demonstrated by the ancient Egyptians. That's pretty good. Because in the 18th century, 17th and 18th centuries, in France, Louis XIV was just throwing his vast wealth at furniture design and furnishings, and he was creating workshops to create some of the most beautiful furniture really ever made. So, nice job, Egypt. This illustration here is of a dovetail joint. This is what a dovetail joint is. You can see that looks kind of like a bird's tail. It's a very strong joint. I made one cutting the pins and tails by hand with a small saw. It's challenging. Materials. What is it made of? Wood, steel, stone? Materials matter. If it's made of wood, which type of wood? Pine is lightweight, inexpensive, and less durable than a wood such as oak. The type of wood is linked also to the value of the object. Pine is cheap. Other woods, like cherry, is a more expensive wood. Walnut is a more expensive wood. They are harder. They have a more beautiful finish. So sometimes you use pine, sometimes you use the nicer woods. Depends on what you're making. Mahogany. I showed an image of a mahogany tree. English furniture, for example, that's made with mahogany. Mahogany is a tree that grows in like the southern Americas, like South America, the Caribbean, and English furniture made with mahogany, like in the 18th century, for example, is really inextricably tied to its vast empire, because England is not in the Americas, and also to the exploitation of African slaves. So this, I linked this in Blackboard, Beyond the Luster of Mahogany, that appeared in the New York Times. It's a little bit more real information about what it cost to harvest mahogany. So on to Egypt. The ancient civilization of Egypt can be traced back to about 8,000 BCE, though the early dynastic period belongs around 3150. Later periods are the ones that left behind the artifacts that we know today. Some of the earliest wooden furniture of which we have examples were made by the Egyptians. Tutankhamun's tomb, among many others, yielded examples of the furniture types that are still in use. And Tutankhamun's tomb held a lot of really good examples, like some particularly beautiful stuff. It's the reason you hear about King Tut is because the stuff that they found. I think it was 1922. His tomb was discovered. The stuff in there was really special, particularly beautiful. Um, by the way, you may have seen there was a question about the headrests. I've you know I've read off and on just different things because the headrests are always it's interesting to me. Like you you know why do you wear a headrest, or why do you use a headrest when you're sleeping instead of a pillow? Well, pillows were not necessarily so easily made or obtained or maintained in certain places. So the headrest was meant, you're supposed to sleep on your side. The headrest was supposed to go right above the ear and support your head when you're on its side. Someone asked about scale with the headrests. They're relatively small. They do sometimes look like they are a little, like they're just awfully tall, like your neck wouldn't be supported, and your neck would not be supported. But if you're on your side and your shoulders on the bed, it does not seem. It's still, no matter how I look at those things, still it's like it doesn't seem comfortable. But it's a different culture, so I don't have to necessarily understand it or knock it, but it's interesting. I've never used a headrest when sleeping. I don't know if anyone has in this in our group here. Okay, so how did this furniture survive for thousands of years? Three primary reasons. It was sealed into stone tombs of pharaohs and other nobility. Sometimes it was plated in gold, which protected the wood. Egypt is a very dry climate. So all these factors meant that a lot of this furniture stayed in decent shape for thousands of years. And we are the beneficiaries of it because we can see that what this stuff looked like is there is, I can't think of another civilization where we have so many artifacts from such an old civilization. And so these furniture types, well, um, I'm sorry, I got distracted by that request. Before I do the furniture types, it is clear from the samples that we have that the Egyptian upper class enjoyed luxury. This is not cheap stuff. And mining for gold is a lot easier now than it was then. Creating pigments from earth tones, a lot harder to it's a lot harder to get at things. We look at the pyramids, people still wonder, like, how did they build them? They didn't have mechanical equipment such as we have now to build these enormous pyramids of stone. It was all done by hand. Lots of slaves, lots of miserable people, just to build these huge tombs. And really, the pyramids are tombs. It's a lot of stone. It's a lot of stone for one tomb. Well, it's not just one tomb, but it's a lot of stone for a tomb. Okay. So, Angela, I think I made a mistake in giving you permission to make annotations. If you wanted to do that for yourself, that's fine. But
No, I accidentally pressed it. I didn't know what it was. Sorry.
oh, okay. All right. Okay. And someone said it looks like I'm not recording, but I thought I did have this. Oh, see, there we go. We don't want to do that. Not too worried. let's see here. Back to this. Okay, just a second. I'm going to. Yeah. So Bilkis, I just checked. I am recording. Thank you for bringing that up. I would hate it if I thought I were recording and I won't. Okay. Where was I? Luxury. This is luxury stuff. In the Egyptian civilization, the pharaoh was a god. Pretty much everything goes to the pharaoh that the pharaoh wants. So not a democratic society, you might say. It is definitely stratified with certain classes of people who fulfill certain roles, and you have an elite that rules. Very conservative society. It discouraged change and innovation. Novelty and creative self-expression can be a threat to stability and order, especially if you are a god-like pharaoh. You don't want people to get their own ideas about it, about really anything. So, but that conservative climate, I guess you could say, led to consistency in the kinds of ornament and representation, and so you can see it for thousands of years. A lot of it doesn't really seem to change. Okay, so the Egyptians introduced different furniture types: chairs, stools, couches, tables, beds, boxes, storage chests, headrests. Chairs really have not changed a lot. 20th century, people come up with some goofy ideas for chairs, which are fun. But a chair's function doesn't change. A stool really doesn't change. Couches, same thing, for reclining, for sleeping. A couch, by the way, and a sofa are not the same thing. You will hear this if you haven't already. A sofa has a back. A couch does not. A couch might have arms. A sofa has arms and a back. That's the difference. So if you're sitting on a sofa and you're calling it a couch, call it a sofa, because it's a sofa. And when you go to buy furniture, when you working in interior design, and you want to go buy furniture for a client, you need to, if they want a sofa, you get a sofa. If they want a couch, there are couches, just like these cool little, it's got arms on it, but it's got no back on it. There are times when you want a couch, but most of the time, what people refer to as a couch is a sofa. Okay, furniture construction, joinery, how wood is put together, different types of joints. Abutment joint, that's just two pieces of wood coming together, 90-degree angle, and attached with some kind of adhesive or something to screw it. Probably they would have used dowels. Drill a hole, put a peg of wood in there, and it'll hold it together. Oh, sorry, my mouse is very sensitive there. A miter joint, 45-degree angle. Shoulder miter is a 45-degree angle. It's got a little extra wood, a little bit of extra cutting in it. I would encourage you to look some of these joints up if you're interested. Dovetail, I showed you a halving joint is like wood comes together kind of like that, and you cut out part of both pieces and they kind of fit together so it's flush. I know that as a lap joint from furniture design. And the reason I suggest that you look up some of these, look up what some of these are, is that Um, it would have taken me a lot longer if I'm embedding images of everything I'm showing you. So some of this stuff I want you to go look up for yourself. All right, wood types. Cedar, cypress, and ebony were common woods used by the Egyptians. That's what grows there. Decorative techniques, inlay, gilding, and carving. Inlay is when you cut out a piece of the wood in a shape and then you embed something else in it, a gemstone, bone, ivory, a different type of wood. It's a decorative technique. And carving, of course, carving designs into a surface of wood means you have a lot of control over what you make the appearance, what you do with its appearance. Okay, now some animal motifs. Animals were important to the Egyptians. I don't think I could list all of them. Lion, bull, ibis. The bird that you saw on that stool is likely an ibis. Cat, vulture. They love cats. I love cats. Dennis is sitting here being real cute. They revered cats. There are, stop it. There are sarcophagi built for cats. Some beloved cats that died were mummified as humans were mummified, and they built the sarcophagus for a cat in the shape of a cat and put the kitty in there. Respect. The vulture. Sometimes you see a motif. It looks kind of like wings with a circle. It's a vulture holding a sun disk. You won't be expected to know every last thing about Egyptian culture. This class being covering the earliest civilizations to as close to the present day as we can get means I can't really go into the amount of detail any of these time periods deserve. So I'll produce some supplemental reading, probably more information than you need. We'll talk about next week, we'll talk about what you can expect for the quiz. But because I'm giving you a week to complete the quiz online and you have really just open resources, I might challenge you with some of this information and ask you to identify some of it when you may not have it off the top of your head, but you could go looking for it, and I'm certain you would find it. Okay, that's some of the stool design with the crossed legs. That sort of crossed leg X-frame design has persisted, and some contemporary furniture designers will use it, specifically referring back to the Egyptians. So the Egyptian furniture, in some respects, it's not necessarily that's a model for modern furniture, because a lot of it we didn't know about until the last 100, 200 years. But some people did know. I mean, people did know, from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Romans to the European medieval society. Some people were aware of what had gone on in the past. But sometimes it is a little hard to say that, exactly, that they specifically looked at the Egyptians. They may have looked at Roman, which may have, a designer might have looked at Roman furniture or Greek furniture that may have some relationship with Egyptian, and never saw the Egyptian. Okay, but that X frame you'll see reappear. A lot of words just to say that. Sorry, I sometimes things make me think of other things, and it's all important. It's all good information. Now, Egyptian architecture, domestic architecture, what regular old people lived in, was made of far less durable materials than temples, primarily like wood, thatch, like reeds, far less permanent material than temples, pyramids, and palaces. So that stuff didn't survive. There are there's evidence of where these residences were, and there have been some reconstruction attempts at reconstructing what an Egyptian, like what their domestic architecture looked like. But what we have primarily that we look at: tombs, pyramids, temples. A lot of that stuff is what you'll see in later classes. Egyptian revival, like in the 19th century, 18th century, you'll get Egyptian revival architecture in in England, in the United States, probably more there. And you'll see elements that are clearly Egyptian, like an Egyptian type of column, or like the monumental gate known as a pylon might be the facade of a building. I think I showed you one last week that's at in Virginia. So that stuff, that more monumental architecture, the temple architecture, the tombs, that's the stuff that is that's more like the stuff that's recycled in architecture. Okay. Now, get off. All right. Now let's see. So there are tombs and temples, large structures made of stone that were imposing, stylized, symmetrical, and seemed to reinforce notions of stability and permanence. Trapezoidal entrance, the trapezoidal entrance or pylon, they have like this slightly smaller at the top, flanked by large figurative stone sculptures, sphinxes, obelisks, painted and carved with hieroglyphics. In terms of structure, the basic trabeated construction was most common in terms of how they built things, which is vertical, horizontal, post and lintel, column and beam. Post is vertical, lintel is horizontal. A hypostyle hall is a type of hall with its roof supported by columns, and it's really just a lot of columns. It's like this forest of columns. And it's a way to create a large interior space without the use of arches. The Egyptians didn't use, there's evidence of arches being used a little bit in Egyptian architecture, but they used so much massive stone that you couldn't put an arch there. They didn't have the understanding of the engineering of the arch, and so they didn't really use it. The Romans are the one. We'll talk about that when we talk about the Romans next week. Clerestory is a raised section of roof in architecture. Clerestory windows are windows in that section, that raised section, that allow light to enter what would otherwise be a dark interior. Column design. They can be plain and smooth cylinder, tapering as it goes up. They can be like the shape of a polygon, sort of flat sides going around, or reeded. The reeded columns are sometimes more obviously Egyptian. It looks like a bundle of reeds. It's just like these like rods, all kind of bound together. So reeded columns, Egyptian. A capital, the top or head of a column, often decorated with either a lotus, papyrus, or palm motif. The lotus, sometimes it's like this, it's the bud, and sometimes it's fanned out like a blossom. Lotus blossom, like the lotus is possibly most. Lotus and palm, I think I see more frequently. Papyrus can be a little hard to tell. Materials and stone types: granite, limestone, basalt, and porphyry. Different types of stone that are local. You use local materials, especially in those days, even though they could have slaves drag it from wherever they wanted. They still had a limited range. Facades of architecture were usually painted and feature limited fenestration, which is window openings, likely due to the weight of the architecture. So small window openings or fenestration. The arch was known but rarely used due to the weight. An axial layout of the temple architecture, that is a T, really. You have the processional area that goes into usually like a hypostyle hall, and then you have the temple, like the temple sanctuary on one side or the other. All right, interiors. Evidence from tombs show us that interior surfaces were painted elaborately with colors mostly derived from mineral pigments, such as ochre or iron oxide. Floors were made of stone, clay, or polished plaster. Artificial light was generated with lamps using oil or fat as fuel. And finally, the Nile. The Nile figures greatly in Egyptian culture. Kemet is one of the ancient names for what we call Egypt. Egypt is really a Greek term. It's a Greek understanding. In Greek, it is Aegyptos, and it is a Greek modification or misunderstanding of what the Egyptians were calling their like where they live. But Kemet means black land and is a reference to the dark, fertile soil along the banks of the Nile River. The Nile, its plants, wildlife were crucial to Egyptian life, and a stylized representation of these things appears. I guess stylized representations of these things appear in decorative ornament. Pharaohs, religious deities, and other symbolic characters also populate Egyptian art and decoration. For this survey course, one of the most important things to recognize is that what Egyptian compared with Greek, Persian. I'm sorry, I have to rewrite that. It's a terrible sentence. For this survey course, the most important thing to recognize is what is Egyptian compared with Greek, Persian, Roman, Phoenician, other ancient cultures. The primary comparison in the Euro-American tradition is Egyptian, Greek, and Roman. There. That's what I really would have preferred to have accompany those other videos. So I hope that helps. That's posted here, so you can review that as you like. Now, briefly also, I posted a weekly schedule here. It's generally what we're going to be doing each week. I'm just going to I'll add detail week to week as we go. So, like this week, we will be talking about the ancient Greeks soon, and I'm going to introduce the vocabulary card assignment too. Okay, good. Thank you. See, this is why I have to write this stuff down. All right. So check that out. That goes all the way to the end of the semester. Your final exam, which is way off in the middle of December, is going to open on December 16th, and you're going to have to complete it by midnight December 18th. I might open it up sooner than that. We'll see. Some of this stuff can change. It has dates for when I want you to start, when I have quizzes open, quizzes close, vocabulary assignments open, when they close. I wouldn't read ahead and freak out about everything, because just take it a week at a time. All right? Or 2 weeks at a time, maybe. So the school also wanted us to add this notice regarding recording of online sessions. I will record this. If you don't want you don't want to be seen, you don't even necessarily want your name on this if it's being recorded, you can change your name to Student 1 or Student 2. You could call yourself Scooby-Doo if you want to. As long as but I might say like who is Scooby-Doo? I might ask to know who you are. Since this isn't required that you're here, I'm not taking attendance for this. So you probably don't even need to worry about that. Okay, but that's just I guess we want to notify people that this is being recorded. If you activate your camera, then it can become a part of the presentation. So I have no choice. I have to show myself, but I understand. Privacy might be important. Well, it is important. Okay, good. Down here, I also this supplemental reading and web resources section. I threw in this. This is Ancient History Encyclopedia, which could be kind of useful for some summary of information. You can search different ancient civilizations. This is this New York Times article on the history of slavery. I have a subscription to New York Times. If you don't, it might not let you read it. I hope it does. But here, there's an entire book, Mahogany, The Costs of Luxury in Early America. Yeah, see here, the mahogany for 18th century furniture was harvested under appalling conditions across the Caribbean. Slaves branded with owners' monograms lived in thatched huts and scouted for trees. They had to drag and roll felled mahogany trunks to riverfronts, then float the logs, which were chained together to ships, waiting in bays full of sharks and coral reefs. Nasty, huh? Well, that's kind of, that's sort of par for the course of this with slavery. So I think we can agree that it's not a very nice thing to do to anybody. Okay. And within presentations, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. That's there. Then I'll post the online video session, there's the link to the my YouTube page here, or YouTube channel right there. But YouTube. So in my YouTube, I've created a it's a section in it. So there's a section that is for history of furniture. Okay. Good. Enough there. So that's good. I wanted to just make sure I go over that information. And I'm going to take about 5 minutes, and then we're going to talk about the Greeks. Are there any questions yet?
No.
Thank you for responding. Good. I realize that some of that is a repetition of last week, but I wanted to make sure I went over this stuff, especially some of there's a lot with the Egyptians. There's a lot with any of them. And so some of that stuff with the Egyptians sets up what happens later. Okay. So I'm going to break the recording, and I'm going to take 5 minutes. And so at 6:55, I'll begin again.